USC already, of course, has a great offensive mind on the sideline in Lincoln Riley, one of the very best in the business, but it couldn't hurt to add to the brain trust. Welcome into USC Live right here at the Voice of College Football. And we come your way each and every Monday night at 8 o'clock Pacific time with Matt Zemek from Trojans Wire. Matt, it's always good to see you. How you doing tonight?
Never a dull moment with USC. These are exciting times. Like in basketball, like USC could get Bronny James and get the LeBron James kind of circus. That's a possibility. And basketball team might be like top 10. And now we get this Kliff Kingsbury report just about 90 minutes before the start of our show. So exciting times at Heritage Hall. And let's just dive right in with this Kliff Kingsbury story. So first off, I need to remind everybody watching here at the Voice of College Football that Kliff Kingsbury was previously employed by USC. Now, it wasn't very long. This was like the George Leary head coaching tenure at Notre Dame, the Manny Diaz head coaching tenure at Temple. One of those tenures that just lasted 10.3 seconds, never coached a game
Bill
for the
Belichick.
program, never wore the colors on the sidelines on a game day, but he was hired. He was employed. Lynn Swann, the former athletic director, hired him in December of 2018. But then he bolted for the NFL and the Cardinals just weeks later. So Kliff Kingsbury, technically, officially, this is his second go-around at USC. But it's not under Clay Helton. It's under Lincoln Riley. And so where do we begin with all this? Well, first off, people are going to ask, does this mean that Lincoln Riley is going to be heading off to the NFL? Like there's always been this undercurrent of speculation. Does Lincoln Riley really secretly hate the move to the Big Ten? Did he really not want that all along? Like, is that not what he signed up for? Is this like Lincoln Riley paving the runway for a flight out of town? You're going to get that speculation. I'm not going to call you an idiot. I'm not going to call anyone an idiot if you raise that, because it's just going to exist. I'm not going to offer any predictions in terms of what's actually going to happen, but that speculation's coming. That those whispers are now going to be part of the USC season in 2023. So that's just the subplot there. It's just there. Yeah, not saying whether it's good or bad, just that that's going to be a thing. All right. That's going to be a talking point. It's going to be a source of endless speculation. And, in terms of what this means for Kliff Kingsbury, I do think that it does mean that this is going to be a bridge toward a college head coaching job. So that's what I feel confident in saying. I don't, not really thinking that, there's going to be a Lincoln Riley departure and that Kliff Kingsbury is the coach in waiting. I'm not thinking that, but I do think that Kliff's not going to do this for more than just 2023. I think this is a one-year deal. I think that is going to be a piece of the puzzle in all of this, and that then Kliff is going to look for his next college head coaching job, because after the way the Cardinals imploded, and you look at everything that happened there, he's not ready to go back to the NFL. And moreover, the NFL is not ready for him. The NFL does not want Kliff Kingsbury back. No NFL org would seriously want to say, oh, we got to have Kliff Kingsbury. That's not happening. He will need to do well at a collegiate head coaching job for several years before anyone in the NFL entertains the idea that, maybe we can give this guy a second shot in the pros. So I think that's, in terms of what I feel safe and what I feel confident in predicting, that's what I feel confident in predicting, that this is a bridge toward a college head coaching job for Kliff Kingsbury in the future, and that he'll try and rebuild his career that way. But this is kind of the year when, he doesn't have a ton of responsibilities. He can just drill deep in coaching Caleb Williams and also Miller Moss and also Malachi Nelson. I think that is an underappreciated aspect of all this, that of course you're going to give Caleb Williams more hands-on instruction, but you're also coaching the backups. And Lincoln Riley, in terms of branching out and considering all the dimensions of this move, I think what USC fans should be encouraged by here is that it means that Lincoln Riley wants to delegate a little bit of quarterback coaching to someone else so that he can dive in a little bit more to the defense and that he can be more of a complete head coach. I mean, I think that Lincoln Riley's being smart here, that, I need to see the big picture. Like, I can call plays and I can, scheme them up and design plays with the best of them. That's not a worry. And he has a loaded offense. He has so many pieces exactly in place, exactly where he wants them to be. Lincoln Riley, this is a year where Lincoln Riley needs to grow up as a complete head coach, as the overseer of a whole operation, not just his beloved toys on the offensive side of the ball. He needs to be more engaged with the defense. And so this move with Kingsbury serves the purpose of, hey, I got an elite expert, and someone he knows, by the way. They were both, Kingsbury and Riley were both quarterbacks under Mike Leach at Texas Tech in 2002. So there is a relationship here. Now, they didn't spend time as assistants on the same staff, but they both did learn the game from Mike Leach in Lubbock 21 years ago as players. So there is something of a history there. There is something of a connection there. And so Lincoln Riley naturally feels, hey, Kliff, help me out here, buddy. Help me out coaching these quarterbacks. And it's not as though I'm just going to put you off in a corner and you do that while I do other things. But it is just delegating more of the workload, delegating more of the hands-on responsibilities. One of the iconic images in college football history is Bear Bryant in the tower looking over the whole Alabama practice field. And that was part of Bear Bryant's genius and his wisdom, literally looking at the big picture, but also, being able to watch various people in various situations. Also what Bear Bryant did, when he was a pioneer in this regard, or at least he did it really well before others did it, is that he coached his coaches. He coached the overseers on his team. And Lincoln Riley hasn't really checked that box in his career, right? He really hasn't met that kind of standard in his days at Oklahoma and in this first year at USC. Now, you could say that what he's done with Josh Henson on the USC offensive line, that might be one of his better jobs at player development. But in terms of a whole program, in terms of defense, in terms of special teams, where he hasn't bothered to hire a special teams coordinator, Lincoln Riley really does need to look at the full picture. And so being able to give off a portion of his overall coaching plate of responsibilities to Kliff Kingsbury, that furthers that particular goal. And so that is an astute move. And that gives Lincoln Riley more space to be the guy in the tower. Now, you won't literally be in a tower, but just that larger notion of looking at the whole landscape at USC, looking at his full operation in a year when, he knows that the defense has to make the cut. It has to make the grade. The Kingsbury move is, of course, an offensive move. And a lot of Trojan fans will rightly ask, well, why can't we get an elite consultant, an analyst on defense? I recommended Gary Patterson once he stepped down at Texas. Why can't we get that kind of consultant? And that's a valid point. But even though this is an offensive move and people might say, well, but what about the defense? Well, but this is Lincoln Riley really taking a proactive step to look at the other facets of his team. And he's going to give a slice of the oversight responsibility to the offense and the quarterbacks to Kliff Kingsbury, who, and let's dig into the history of Kliff, helped mentor Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech, helped mentor Johnny Manziel, helped him win the Heisman Trophy in 2012 at Texas A&M under Kevin Sumlin. So Kingsbury has serious chops as a quarterback coach, as a quarterback guru, quarterback whisperer, whatever you want to call it. So Lincoln Riley now has a helper who can, just give Caleb Williams and Malachi Nelson and Miller Moss even more teaching. And this frees up more time, more headspace for Lincoln Riley to look at the defense, to look at the special teams, to look at the whole operation. One of the things that Tim Prangley and Rick Anaya have been so good at doing on their show, Trojan Conquest Live, Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Their most recent show was Saturday because this past Sunday was Easter. You want to subscribe and share their show every weekend here at the Voice of College Football. But one thing that Tim and Rick have been so good at emphasizing is that Lincoln Riley, his challenge this year, it's not just about scoring points, calling plays, getting the most production out of his offense. There's a real need for USC to not just score, but possess the ball. And there's going to be a challenge in terms of not just scoring, but resisting the temptation to get the quick strike all the time. 8-minute scoring drives, 9-minute touchdown drives. There's going to be a need for that. Like we saw it in the Cotton Bowl. They were running the play clock under 5 seconds well before the end of the game. Like with 11 minutes left in the fourth quarter, Lincoln Riley was bleeding that play clock. He was conscious of the need to give Tulane as few snaps as possible, shorten the game, make sure as much as he could have that, this terrible USC defense would not be overexposed, would not be on the field any longer than necessary. And it still didn't work. But it was still very successful. 13 third down conversions. I'm including 2 fourth down conversions as third down conversions because that's something that I believe. But USC, converted all those third downs, possessed the ball a ton. It still wasn't enough. But even then, you could see the intentional effort by Lincoln Riley. Not so much to score, though USC, scored a pile of points, but to do so by possessing the ball, keeping it away from a very good offense against USC's limited defense. So it's not as though Lincoln Riley is just trying to get points, get yards, fatten up numbers. He has that juggling act this year of needing to score while possessing the ball to a certain extent. Now, I think at the beginning of a game, you're thinking about, let's just get the lead so that our defense isn't isn't playing with really low margins. Let's get ahead, and then we'll possess the ball. Once we get that 2-possession lead, we're going to run the ball more with a 2-possession lead, things that USC wasn't able to do in the Utah game when it went in Salt Lake City, when it went up by 14 points, wasn't able to mash the ball on the ground, keep the ball away from Cam Rising and Dalton Kincaid. So it's not as simple as just scoring and producing. Lincoln Riley needs to think about ball control as well as scoring this season. And so full circle, hiring Kliff Kingsbury just enables Kingsbury and enables Riley too to say, hey, the technique part of the quarterback position, it's going to be taken care of. Lincoln Riley is trying to free up headspace to deal with these other particular challenges that are specific to the 2023 season at USC.
Matt is on it tonight. Matt just went on for about 13 minutes and just laid down some serious background on Kliff Kingsbury, on Lincoln Riley, on why this makes sense, which seems to be very obvious to all of us, but certainly Matt gave a ton of layers and waves to it, going back to Kliff Kingsbury's experience. And just to add another bit of a layer there, of course, as Matt said, you can find Kliff Kingsbury, for those of you who are a little bit younger and don't go back nearly 20 years in college football viewing, in a long line of Mike Leach quarterbacks who would just, bam, insert quarterback and insert 4,000 yards and 35 or 40 touchdown passes. And he was in that line and one of the very first there at Texas Tech. Then, of course, after the Johnny Manziel run there at Texas A&M and what he was able to do with Manziel as the most productive and dynamic offensive player in college football, got that shot as head coach at Texas A&M and produced all of about a 35% winning percentage in the Big 12 and was, I don't know, I think he was under 500 overall, something in that range. But I do remember the atrocious conference record. But that's still, in some ways, because of his reputation for offensive football and his expertise there, earned him a head coaching position in the NFL with the Arizona Cardinals, which at first, along with Kyler Murray's career trajectory, started off well, but capsized after that. And now Kliff Kingsbury looking for new life, new fresh start to his career. And again, it all totally makes sense, Matt, because you got to think that Lincoln Riley, he knows what some of the criticisms are out there of him. And nobody's going to deny the offensive expertise, the quarterback development, all the things we all know. And that has translated both at Oklahoma and USC to outstanding success if you're just measuring wins and losses. But people want to see championships. And of course, he won at conference championships, but hey, that's kind of an outdated thing. Nobody cares about conference championships anymore, although I tout them and still try to keep them alive as being relevant and important because natties are, boy, those are tough to attain. Not that that is not the goal at USC, because it certainly is, but here's a guy that's cranking out 10, 11, 12 wins per year, but he knows what the criticisms are, that he's not a complete head coach, that he only cares about offense or only cares to the extent that he's not willing to get involved in the defense and really take care of that side of the football. And he won't silence those critics until USC actually fields a defense that's near championship caliber or won't get into in the way of an offense that is going to produce a championship at USC.
Yeah, there's no question. This is like a work distribution. This is a headspace management move by Lincoln Riley, so that in terms of all of his responsibilities as not just a head coach, but like the face of USC football. Like it's tapping into not, like how does he do on game days? It's much less about game days and it's much more about the other 6 days of the week. We just celebrated Easter Sunday, and a lot of priests and pastors will tell you, okay, you go to my church on Sunday for 1 hour, but what do you do the other 6 days of the week? And this really is the other 6 days of the week move for Lincoln Riley, so that in terms of game planning, in terms of coaching his coaches, in terms of seeing how players are developing or not on the practice field, it's really, and this is a subplot that's going to carry into this Saturday's upcoming USC spring game at noon in the Coliseum. It's really, how does Lincoln Riley coach and evaluate in the 6 days of the week other than game day? Because when we get to game day and the bright lights come on, Lincoln Riley, will design plays, call plays, as well as anyone in the country. Like, that's not his worry. That's not something that I'm sure he loses sleep about, because he's in such command of that. But like, this applies to any person in life, in any field of endeavor. If you haven't mastered the subject matter in something, you're obviously a lot more nervous. You're obviously a lot more unsure of yourself. And after the Pac-12 championship game, and then especially the Cotton Bowl, Lincoln Riley just heard all the familiar refrains and all the glee from Oklahoma Sooner fans. Like, we told you. And that he had to just hear it. He had to eat it. He had to own it. He had to absorb it. And like, he knows that he has to figure out the defensive side of the ball. He knows he can't settle for and accept mediocrity, and he needs to get that thing fixed. And this move with Kliff Kingsbury, while obviously on the surface an offensive move and an augmentation of what he has on offense, it is designed to give him more freedom and more time to drill deep on defense, also special teams, and become a more well-rounded head coach. So like, that is the central story of this. This is the maturation of Lincoln Riley. Folks watching here at the Voice of College Football, remember our Riley Files series from last summer, and our guest, former Oklahoma, well, not former Oklahoma, he's still an Oklahoma insider, Keegan Renault. Like, he said at multiple points in that 12-part podcast series, you can go into our archives at Trojans Wire for all 12 episodes. But he said, like, Lincoln Riley is loyal. He's stubborn. He goes, he will die on certain hills. Can he pull himself away from the stubborn and loyal aspects of his identity, of his personality, of his relationship with Alex Grinch? Can he make the tough decisions? Can he expand his view and his philosophy to look harder at defense, to do things in a different way, to consider, new ways of doing things. This is it. This is part of that. This is, like, I don't have to be doing everything. I don't have to be micromanaging the offense. I have a program to run, not just an offense to run. I didn't get paid to coach the USC offense. I got paid to coach the USC football program in its totality. This is a grow-up moment. Now, of course, the relationship with Alex Grinch, that's still, to be determined, and how this year goes and what results Lincoln Riley gets, and then how he reacts at the end of it. Like, that's going to be the ultimate measure of, his tenure at USC and also how he evolves as a coach. So, like, this is not the ultimate example or test of Lincoln Riley's coaching ability at USC, but it is a turning point in that we're seeing some self-awareness. We're seeing an acknowledgement that, you know what, I can't do it all myself on offense. I need to branch out. I need to have more time in those 6 non-game day days of the week to look at the other pieces of the puzzle at USC.
David Day, thank you so much for encouraging everyone to hit the like button. So there was a study that I saw about sports media a few months ago, and it basically showed that on a show, for example, like a Sports Center, which is, of course, one of the flagship shows of all time in sports, back in the heyday, they would do about 95% content and about 5% of promotions. And now it's like 60-40, 65-35, where they spend a third of the show promoting other events on ESPN and showing you billboards of, their various sponsors and all of that. So understand right here at the Voice of College Football, we give you about 98% content. So hang with me for just a second here and just realize that Matt's here every week for us on Monday night, delivering USC football talk. Rick and Tim on Sunday night, we do our best to provide a look at USC for all of you. So we appreciate that. Number one, it's easy. Just click the like button. That helps the algorithm. YouTube loves that. It's not to massage my ego that we got a bunch of likes. I don't even look at that. This is for YouTube algorithms. And they believe that the engagement shows that people must like it. If they like the video, in practicality, they truly do like it. So they push it out into traffic for everyone else. And again, please join us. And you guys are our contact with tons of people that we would otherwise never be able to contact. So please help us out on social media, direct content with people that love USC, that love college football. Because if you notice in the chat, we have a section of the audience that are just college football lovers and are here just to gain the latest on USC. So please also leave those comments and questions there in the chat as well. And of course, join Matt on Trojans Wire as he does an outstanding job there as we prepare for Saturday's spring game. Matt, one thing that I always find intriguing in these situations where a head coach hires another head coach, somebody that's accomplished at some level. And at this point, we're looking at a situation where a collegiate head coach, even though he's well accomplished, much more so than Kliff Kingsbury at this level, is hiring a guy that was an NFL head coach. Just the dynamic of those two working together. Now, I know Lincoln Riley doesn't necessarily exude the heavy-handed Woody Hayes type, like I'm going to be chewing you out every other day. But at the same time, I always wonder about, we're dealing with guys that are extremely, and I'm going to say this in a complimentary way, they obviously have egos, or they would not have achieved to the point that they have. And to be suddenly in a submissive position on a coaching staff under someone else when you've been an NFL head coach, I always just wonder about that dynamic.
It's a good question. I think the fact that you're working with Caleb Williams, a reigning Heisman Trophy winner, like, it's not as though Kliff Kingsbury is coming to USC with, can he develop Caleb Williams? Can he make the most out of this? Like, it's not even a question. It's really just a work sharing agreement. Like, it's not as though, well, Kliff Kingsbury is under the gun. Like, that's not the reality. Like, this is relatively speaking a low pressure job for Kingsbury after, the NFL chewed him up and spat him out. So in many ways, like, this is just a soft landing spot, and also a chance for, Kingsbury to, work with an elite NFL talent. Here's another thing that's worth considering. And I didn't consciously think of this before we went on the air, but it just occurred to me that with Deuce Robinson, being part of the mix now at USC. And let's remember that Deuce Robinson, he has something in common with Kyler Murray, and that is being a two-sport star and guiding two sports stars, guiding football, baseball athletes through the process of navigating the football world. So what did Kliff Kingsbury recently do? He coached Kyler Murray. So, like, one would think that Kliff Kingsbury and Deuce Robinson are going to have some conversations. Now, of course, Kliff Kingsbury is going to be consulting and guiding the quarterbacks, but the Deuce Robinson piece of this puzzle, also, I think, a reason for Lincoln Riley to make this particular move. So that's another small but very real part of the puzzle. And just the larger fact that, he has Kliff Kingsbury, hey, I coach Kyler Murray. Kingsbury can more directly convey to Caleb Williams and also to Malachi Nelson, hey, this is what it's all about. This is what you need to thrive at the next level. These are the tools that you need to develop, and this is how you need to see the geometry of football, the geometry of the field, in order to be your very best self. So, like, there's an NFL player development angle here for Caleb Williams, for Malachi Nelson, and for the future quarterbacks who come to USC. Like, this is a way for Lincoln Riley to also sell USC as we're now quarterback university. And so the school, which used to be student body right, this really cements in a very symbolic but powerful way. It cements USC as, like, this is the place where you get a graduate degree in quarterbacking. This is a place where you're just going to get all the elite knowledge, all the elite instruction. Like, it's the Harvard of quarterbacking here at USC. And so, like, these are some other, there is a branding element to this. There is an identity piece to all of this in terms of, hey, quarterbacks in high school, if you want to come to USC, you are going to get the best teaching on the art of quarterbacking anywhere in the United States. And so, like, that should not be ignored in terms of the larger calculus Lincoln Riley has. Now, and in terms of what this means for the Raiola recruitment, like, I'm not going to say, like, oh, this moves the needle decisively, but that Raiola is paying attention to this. That he's going, wow, that's notable. And so, like, it does open some doors. It does open some possibilities, one would think, for Lincoln Riley to continue to build his recruiting empire at the quarterback position and at the other Cadillac skill positions at USC.
If you're just jumping on the line with us, reports coming out just about 2 hours ago that Kliff Kingsbury is joining the staff at USC as an offensive analyst of sorts, but basically focused on the quarterback position. And of course, the USC spring game is coming up this Saturday. And of course, it's going to be interesting to hear from both Kliff Kingsbury and Lincoln Riley when this, in fact, is announced and there is a news conference, and just to hear, I got to think that a lot of the questions and the storylines that we've raised will be raised to those two. Now, how forthright will they be about all of this? We shall see if they give us a lot of coach speak, or if there are some threads of intrigue there that we can grasp from that. We appreciate Rick and Tim being in the chat. And again, one more time, Trojan Conquest. So for example, this weekend, we of course have the spring game coming up on Saturday. And before you catch Matt and I next Monday, well, bam, Rick and Tim will be all over it. And they've got a special guest coming up this week where former USC wide receiver John Jackson will join them to help break down the USC spring game. And again, that's going to be at 5 Pacific time Sunday night. So again, that's every Sunday, but a big spring game edition coming up this Sunday. And then Matt and I circle back next Monday as well. All right, Matt. We'll, of course, collect questions and comments in the chat in whatever direction you want to go in continuing on the Kliff Kingsbury line or heading towards spring practice or the spring game. In fact, this Saturday, that's where Matt and I were headed before 90 minutes ago and the breaking news hit. What's on your plate for Saturday in regards to taking this one in?
I think the first place you have to look at for the USC spring game is defensive line. Like that is by far, in my mind, the number one position group of concern for the Trojans. And it's pretty self-evident, right? Because Tulane was able to score quickly. Tulane was able to run the ball. Tulane was able to mash up front against USC, and such that USC was able to possess the ball, score 45 points, and it still didn't matter. USC still lost because it just got obliterated by Tulane. And hey, like Tulane's a really good team, but it's still Tulane. Like if you're USC, like if the Alabama offensive line blows you up, that's one thing. But USC got smashed by Tulane. And so like that's just a 5-alarm fire. And so as we head into this spring game, who steps up on the defensive line? And I think focusing this conversation a little bit more specifically, Mark, and to everyone watching here at the Voice of College Football, who's the non-Anthony Lucas player who steps up? Because Lucas is most naturally and obviously like he's the candidate who's most likely to step in and replace the production that USC lost with Tuli Tuipulotu leaving. Like Lucas is the new Tuli, or at least like, not necessarily the next Tuli, but he's like the closest approximation. He's the most likely candidate to replace the production, the leadership, the prominence that Tuipulotu provided for USC's defensive line last year. So who are the non-Lucas guys? So like, yeah, not just one guy. Are there multiple guys who step up on the defensive line, joining Lucas and giving USC the hope that, hey, we can actually field a complete defensive line, or at least a defensive line that can do things on the outside, on the inside, and not get absolutely hammered up the middle. And if USC is hammered up the middle this season, especially by the good offensive line that's going to face Utah, Washington, Oregon, then not only are opponents going to score, but they will be able to keep the ball away from Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley and Kliff Kingsbury, and USC's roaring Ferrari of an offense. So USC just has to be strong up front, has to be better. And I know that Tim and Rick have noted on Trojan Conquest Live on their weekend show that guys are thicker, guys are bigger, and that is certainly important. Like that is part of a necessary evolution in terms of being tougher up the middle, being able to stuff the run or at least contain the run. But it doesn't fully address the tackling part. It doesn't fully address the playmaking part. It doesn't fully address, finishing plays off, going from an almost tackle, an almost sack to an actual sack, or at least drawing a holding penalty to blunt an opponent's drive. So will we get multiple guys alongside Lucas? Like I'm not worried about Lucas. Other guys joining Lucas to give USC 3, 4, promising prospects on that defensive front, so that this defense isn't going to be a sieve at the most important, first point of attack in this 2023 season.
We mentioned defense in general being the Achilles heel for Lincoln Riley, not just here at USC, because people need to consider, hey, this was the worst defense in the Pac-12, arguably the season before, and probably the worst defense in USC history. I cannot imagine another one being worse. Okay, you're not going to turn that around in one season. They made some moves that really pay dividends early in the season, but it's just not going to happen in 1 year. So we'll see what the jump ahead is this year. So in addition to the defense, talk to Oklahoma folks and they would tell you that Lincoln Riley is lacking in another area, and it's related to defense and it's related to offensive line. Well, it's related to every position to a certain extent, and that's strength and conditioning program. And you alluded, Matt, to, of course, what Rick and Tim is focused on, and talking about how this is a much better conditioned team, stronger team, and we will need to see that in the trenches, and trying to bring down ball carriers and not bouncing off of them in some of the pathetic ways that we saw that USC defense get hammered, especially late in the season, trying to bring guys to the ground. So the strength and conditioning portion of this is going to be, we're not going to see it so much during the spring, but we're going to have to see it against a live opponent here coming up the last weekend of August. There's a question here, Matt. We've got LFG on the line. We appreciate LFG being here with such an overloaded 2023 USC wide receiver room. Is it possible that 1 to 3 experienced USC wide receivers now on the roster might transfer? And we might have had a tech issue there with Matt. Hopefully he can join us back. Well, I got to say that with obvious defections to the NFL, and we'll get Matt's better opinion on this. Matt, did you get a chance to hear the question? We're being asked from LFG about possible transfers from the wide receiver room in the portal.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it happening, LFG, because you already saw Kyle Ford, Gary Bryant, others leave. So, I'm not seeing the superabundance of numbers in the wide receiver room. Lincoln Riley would probably like to have another one if he could have. Now, I mean, defense is where USC's first priority in the portal is going to be when that May portal window opens. But I don't think you're going to see other departures. I think you've already seen multiple departures of, valuable guys like Kyle Ford. He was a really important, productive receiver when Jordan Addison and Mario Williams got injured last season. So, if he and also Gary Bryant left, that was a calculation by Ford and Bryant that we're not going to get many touches ourselves if the other receivers, Dorian Singer and others coming in, stay healthy. So I think the wide receiver room is actually going to be pretty stable relative to where we are now.
Well, I would say, Oscar, if you want to check out the first 13 minutes of the show, Matt pretty much nailed it. He went on a roll and outlined all the benefits involved, all the angles, all the perspectives in a nice little 12 or 13-minute package. So, Oscar, check that out right off at the top of the show. So, of course, we've got the portal does open on April 15th. I thought that it was going to be at the end of spring practice, and I thought it was a May 1st deal, but I'm hearing here recently April 15th. So that's on Saturday that the portal opens. I don't know how long that's going to be. I would think that they would allow all the spring games to clear, which I believe the last weekend of April, which would be the 29th, will be the last of the spring football games. And USC obviously looking for depth and reinforcements, mostly in the trenches via the transfer portal.
Well, one point of clarification here, and I'm not sure about this, but I know that players were able to file the paperwork for entering the transfer portal in the last 2 weeks of April last year. But in terms of, any portal transactions occurring, that couldn't happen until May 1st. Now, maybe they slid that up. Maybe they slid that up to April 15th. So I don't know. I'm not saying I know, I know this, but just, I do remember, in terms of the whispers surrounding Jordan Addison, that much discussed saga, there was a lot of drama in terms of, okay, when does he submit the paperwork? Because he had to submit the paperwork, I believe, before a certain point in time to be able to be part of the portal class or the portal group on May 1st. So just that's a detail worth keeping in mind. But if it opens April 15th, and then USC needs to be ready to meet that.
Another detail that we got to think is forthcoming, because the SEC has been a little bit more vocal about this, is that they've got their SEC, their annual coaches meetings coming up in Destin, Florida near the end of May. And at that point, I'm hearing that they want to have finalized the 2024 SEC formatted schedule, in the Big Ten in a similar situation with the 2 new additions. And you would think before we get into a 2023 season that they would want to have the schedule format released for the next season, but we shall see. So that could be another set of big news that comes out here in the next couple months concerning USC.
I think I don't know about you, Mark, but I think there's zero doubt that the Big Ten is going to have the 3-6-6 plan, where you have 3 fixed opponents and then you rotate the other 12, 6 one year, 6 the next. I think there's hardly any question that that's going to be the overall architecture. I think the real drama is going to be, who are the 3 fixed annual opponents for USC? Obviously, UCLA is one, but who are going to be the other 2 from the long-term members of the Big Ten? That's going to be really that's going to be the ultimate news value in all of that.
Because it's really quite a guessing game for the 2 new entries versus the long-standing teams in the Big Ten that have set rivalries that you can guess either 1 or 2, if not all 3, and how they fit. And again, if you're focused on one particular school or team, then it's easy to say, well, they should be playing A, B, and C. However, it all has to fit. So you got to run through the entire league to figure out. And then the league, of course, as Matt and I have discussed when this was more of a hot topic a few months ago, of course, there's the various goals that the league has to prioritize and come up with a balance. They're not going to hammer USC or Ohio State or Michigan over the head with the toughest schedule to a certain extent, but they also want the best games and to make the most money and please their media rights holders. So there's a balance to be struck there. But with USC and UCLA obviously not having much of a tie to anyone in the Big Ten in particular, that's who knows what they're going to come up with there. Nebraska seems to be a team that because of distance, but also because of brand and because of past connections to an extent, somebody that may show up on the schedule.
I think Iowa and Nebraska are going to be USC's non-UCLA fixed opponents, but we'll see.
I don't know that we've talked a whole lot about Raleek Brown.
We have not.
And his role and where he is going to fit into this offense. Obviously, much hyped coming out of high school and started to make his way and get more reps down the stretch. Your thoughts about one Raleek Brown?
Well, one thing to keep in mind here is that with Deuce Robinson now being part of this USC offense, and Deuce Robinson, what's a central part of his football identity? That he might be technically listed as a tight end, but he basically plays like a wide receiver. So you carry that over to Raleek Brown, technically listed as a running back, but it sure seems as though we're moving toward using him as like a Swiss Army knife, Darren Sproles type, that he can be used in many different ways. And so basically, like Deuce Robinson, the technical classification of his position really doesn't mean that much, that he's going to be used in different ways, different spots on the field. And it just gives Lincoln Riley so much to play with in terms of the possibilities for this offense. And I think that, that's really the main thing, is that you're not going to give defenses the same looks, the personnel groupings, formations. You're going to be locating these guys, in different positions all the time, so that you don't have a steady, consistent read. Like if you're a middle linebacker or if you're the strong safety and you're trying to diagnose plays before the snap, Lincoln Riley is going to be putting guys in all these different places so that defensive captains and defensive quarterbacks can't get a steady read before the snap on what's going on. So I think that's really the essential thing with Raleek Brown, is that they're going to move him all over the place. The other part of this is that, with Marshawn Lloyd and Austin Jones being there in the backfield, and let's remember, Travis Dye was he was the guy for, the full season until he got hurt. Now USC really does have two workhorse style between the tackles backs who can get tough yards, who can split carries. So it's not going to be a Travis Dye situation where one guy is pretty much carrying almost all of the load. Riley can really split the workload between Lloyd and Jones, and that frees up Raleek Brown, to be this utility guy used in a lot of different places. And, so if the receivers are running, verticals and are going deep, Brown can be the underneath guy. If Deuce Robinson is, drawing more attention as a tight end, then Brown can be on the other side of the field. So it's really about how it works in tandem with the other pieces that Lincoln Riley is going to use. And we saw the blueprint last year that, it's not as though Lincoln Riley would only use Jordan Addison in one specific way, or that he'd use Mario Williams in one specific way. He gets his different players involved in all sorts of different ways, sometimes vertical, sometimes intermediate, sometimes short flat, sometimes as a decoy, sometimes as a blocker. You're going to be able to learn everything, and you're going to have to do everything well, to be involved in the offense. If you're going to get touches, you also need to be, a helper, a blocker or a decoy or somebody who sets the table for somebody else. You have to do different things, and that is really the proper point of emphasis for Raleek Brown. The important thing is that he becomes a more well-rounded player who learns how to play football better. We saw him make a lot of bad decisions in terms of when to cut, when to make his move, when to, go through the hole. His football IQ needed development. And I think it's more important that we see Raleek Brown really become a full student of football this season, more than, are they going to use him as running back? Are they going to use him out of the backfield? Or are they going to line him up as a wide receiver? It's more about his football IQ than where Lincoln Riley positions him. That's really the takeaway that people should have.
In the midst of all the talk concerning Pac-12 media rights and negotiations, that it was reported by ESPN, folks, this week that while university presidents within the Pac-12 have been saying this is a couple weeks away, we're just a couple weeks away, we're just a couple weeks away, now we're hearing, okay, courtesy ESPN and their sources, that we're looking at early summer, sometime throughout the summer, possibly. That's roughly when the Big Ten deal was announced. It was last August, going into the 2022 season. So that kind of spurred me on, and based on a number of requests I had, to kind of break down the TV ratings for the 2022 season and kind of show all of you what the Pac-12 is facing. And that was my first intent there, in regards to how popular is this league, and how popular are the games, and how popular are the two teams that are departing for the Big Ten, and what are they going to be taking away? Well, we all know what that is. We're looking at the most popular brand and the most powerful brand in the conference, and we're looking at one that could be argued anywhere from, let's say, number 3 to number 5 or 6, whether we look historically or currently in UCLA. So check out that series. I continue to get more and more requests, so we have now started to break it down. We went by conference. Now we're going by television window. We went through all the noon games last season and came to a number of conclusions concerning the noon games, Eastern time. Now we just are releasing in the morning, 3:30. We'll go through the prime time. We've looked at the Pac-12 After Dark and those 10:30 window games, and what those have meant for viewership. And of course, now We could be a situation where USC and UCLA are playing a small portion of the schedule, but still probably a key 2 or 3, 4 conference games on the West Coast at night against a maybe marginal conference opponent that the Pac-12 is going to have to go directly up against in that late window against like a USC Illinois game. That's not going to be real fun for the Pac-12 to have to deal with. And on that note, Matt, do you foresee, the Pac-12, we've seen conferences have to deal with this in the past, promoting these teams, promoting these games, but still they are the, they are the betrayers of sorts. And just how the Pac-12 is going to approach promoting this season and kind of spotlighting the action throughout this season. You know that the wheels are spinning, and there's much to talk and debate on kind of how to approach this from a PR standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting angle, but like I don't know how much mileage is gonna be gained from that. And I say that just because like so many of the Pac-12's media problems are already baked in. They're baked in because of the deal that they had with ESPN, with Fox, with Pac-12 Network, that in terms of, the 6-day selections and the more delayed selections and all of those different contractual stipulations. Like, remember that, we had the showdown Saturday on November 19th with, Oregon and Utah being kicked into the late night slot. And that was a huge game. But because, the deal was so poorly drawn up, like we didn't get one of those games in the mid-afternoon and then the other game in prime time. Oregon and Utah had to play a very late night game that was, just kind of shoved out of the way. And so, like in terms of promotion, like in terms of what the Pac-12 does in terms of marketing, it's secondary to ESPN and Fox, putting the Pac-12 in a corner. Like you're just over there in the corner of the room and treating Pac-12 football that way. And that's just things that we're still living with from the Larry Scott reign of error and everything that went into that. And so that's why this media rights piece and this new round of negotiations, is so important. And it's why you're seeing such contentious responses from Big 12 fans and from other fans across college football. There's so much glee because the Pac-12, really, this is a problem of the Pac-12's own making, not Kliavkoff's own making, but of the Pac-12's. Like the Pac-12 is in this spot because Larry Scott wouldn't hand over the keys to ESPN in 2018, to manage the product. The Pac-12 wanted everything to itself. It wanted a fully owned Pac-12 network and ride with the hope that it could, build a revenue base, from that 100% ownership, instead of saying, hey, ESPN, like we tried it ourselves, but we failed. You now need to manage this, and we're going to, cut you in on this. If the Pac-12 had done that, USC and UCLA are probably still members of the conference right now, but, that didn't happen. And so, I'm just more focused on, like, are we going to see USC Oregon kicked to the curb? Is USC Oregon going to be a 10:30, 10:45 p.m. Eastern time game in mid-November, the way Utah and Oregon was? Like that's a concern. Our other USC games, like, the USC Oregon State game last year, well discussed, but might as well revisit it. Like that was a Pac-12 network game. And of course, like that was a hugely important game. Didn't deserve to be on Pac-12 network. And so, that was it just made the Pac-12 more of a national laughing stock. Now, in terms of like how the Pac-12 is going to treat USC, in many ways, we've already gotten our foremost and most centrally important answer. Because the Pac-12 wanted to backload its schedule, backload the biggest games, it just put USC's biggest games together. Notre Dame, Utah, Washington, Oregon, 4 huge games in a 5-week span. And okay, USC, let's see you, get through this gauntlet in your last year. So in many ways, the Pac-12's already flipped the bird to USC by lining up all the tough games consecutively, but in the second half of the season. So like that in itself was a promotional tactic of let's load up the big games later in the season. You know, they're going to have more eyeballs on them, but that went in conjunction with giving USC by far the toughest road of any Pac-12 football team in 2023.
You are right, dependent fanatic. We need to get everyone trained to just jump in here and hit the like button very first thing, and then you get settled, and then you can enjoy Matt's analysis and whatever I have to add to that. Matt, what's going on at Trojans Wire?
Well, I mean, we have so much to cover with Kliff Kingsbury and, you know, so Boogie Ellis coming back to the basketball team. Like USC is going to be a preseason top 15 basketball team, you know, and so we have like, you know, Evan Mobley in the NBA playoffs this week, like all these cross currents between, you know, USC's actual teams on the field and on the court in college and USC players in the pros, the NBA, the NFL draft. You know, where's Jordan Addison going to be? It's all happening at once. So we're just going to try to be the hamster on the treadmill in the watchtower, keeping the operations going. But like, I have a billion things to write after I get off this show here at the Voice of College Football. We're going to try and cover it all at Trojans Wire.
Matt mentions the Pac-12 Network, and of course, that is the destination for the USC spring game, as opposed to the big spotlight from ESPN in Lincoln Riley's first season last year for the spring game, but relegated to the Pac-12 Network. So we don't know where all of you stand. I'm kind of in cable limbo right at the moment, but I had the Pac-12 Network for the last like 9 or 10 months for the first time in my life, which can't say that I watched a whole lot, but Media Days was a good time to have the Pac-12 Network. So I did chime in on the Media Days. And other than that, there was a little football viewing, but shoot, on a Saturday, when you're trying to catch just about everything, the Pac-12 Network is a bit down the scale of the priorities for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, everyone. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. You know to get on over to Trojans Wire and track Matt's work right there. The spring game is coming up on Saturday. We'll have full analysis with Tim and Rick on Sunday at 5 Pacific time. Matt and I will be back here next Monday at 8 Pacific time. And please hit the like button on the way out and tell everyone to come on in next Sunday and next Monday for Trojans talk right here at the Voice of College Football, and we will see you then.